Kanye West?
No,
Kanye!
Kanye.
What's up, brother? Kanye! Happy to see you,
They said the truth would never come out, that the fame, the fortune, the entourage, it was all bulletproof. But now, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs is facing the fight of his life in a federal courtroom. The charges, sex trafficking, coercion, and a web of disturbing allegations that have shocked even his most loyal fans. There are no cameras inside the courtroom, no viral clips, no behind-the-scenes leaks, just courtroom sketches and reporter notes, because what's happening in there is too graphic, too intense, and too real. And when even Kanye West shows up to court but refuses to speak, you know something. Serious is going down, but what's happening behind closed doors is darker than anyone expected. In the middle of all the courtroom chaos, one woman's testimony brought the entire room to a halt. She's known only as Jane, a former girlfriend of Diddy who dated him from 2021 up until his arrest in 2024. Just days before he was taken into custody, she had been planning a trip to visit him, but everything changed when she saw the headlines. She told the court that reading Cassie Ventura's lawsuit, the one that first set this firestorm in motion, felt like reliving her own story. It felt like I was reading my own story of sexual trauma, she said, her voice steady but shaking the room. Jane described a life behind the celebrity curtain that few could imagine. She wasn't just a girlfriend, she was, in her words, trapped. Diddy was still sending her $10,000 a month, but that money, she said, came with an unspoken contract: participate in his hotel nights, or lose everything. These weren't ordinary nights. According to Jane, they were elaborate, scripted events where she was expected to perform for Diddy's pleasure and for his friends. He said if I stopped, he'd stop paying me, Jane testified. And just like that, the money became a leash, but that money came with a price no one should have to pay. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors didn't pull any punches, and neither did Jane. She told the jury about what Diddy allegedly called freak-offs, disturbing, orchestrated sexual events that were more like staged performances than private moments. Jane said they weren't optional. They were scheduled, choreographed, and expected. At these events, she said, Diddy would provide drugs, sometimes ecstasy, sometimes others, to loosen inhibitions and pressure her into going along. She didn't want to. She says she told him that. But according to her testimony, Diddy made it clear: no participation, no payment. He knew I wanted out, she said. But he also knew I depended on him. It wasn't just about sex, it was about control. Jane painted a picture of a man who used money as a weapon, intimacy as a transaction, and influence to keep women compliant. At one point, she said the events blurred into emotional numbness, like she was outside of her own body. And while Diddy watched, others participated, sometimes strangers, sometimes celebrities. And then came a night in Vegas that left the courtroom stunned. Jane's most disturbing memory, according to her testimony, happened on a trip to Las Vegas in January 2023. She was there to celebrate the birthday of a rap icon's girlfriend. The rapper's name wasn't revealed in court. In fact, the judge held more than an hour of closed-door discussions just to decide whether it could even be mentioned publicly. Ultimately, the court decided the name stays sealed. But what Jane described shocked the room. She said that during the night, a man named Antoine began having sex with a woman in the middle of a private hotel party, while several people, including the unnamed rapper and other high-profile guests, just stood and watched. Jane said this wasn't a spontaneous moment. It was part of the culture, a performance, and everyone seemed to know what role they were expected to play. She didn't name the rapper, but her story painted a picture of celebrity circles where boundaries didn't exist, and silence was the price of admission. And just when you think it couldn't get more surreal, Ye shows up. As if the testimony wasn't already surreal, Friday brought another twist. Kanye West, now legally known as Ye, arrived at the courthouse. He showed up dressed entirely in white, stepping out of a black SUV surrounded by cameras and whispers. But what he didn't expect, he wouldn't be let in. Court marshals turned him away from the main courtroom. Instead, Ye was escorted to a separate room downstairs, where he watched the testimony unfold on a closed-circuit monitor, sitting, just feet away from Diddy's son Christian Combs. No one knows exactly why Ye came, whether it was loyalty, curiosity, or damage control. But what's clear is this. After just a short time watching the testimony, Ye abruptly got up and left the courthouse without answering a single question. Some say he looked uncomfortable. Others say he looked furious. Either way, he vanished. Without a word, and the courtroom kept rolling. But the most emotional moment came just minutes later, during a brutal cross-examination. The tension in the courtroom reached a breaking point when Diddy's defense attorney, Tenny Geragos, tried to undermine Jane's credibility. She brought up designer handbags, trying to paint Jane as a willing participant who benefited from Diddy's wealth. The tone turned sharp. Geragos reminded Jane that she had received a Bottega Veneta bag, then asked how much it cost. Jane didn't flinch. She looked the attorney dead in the eyes and said, "How much does my body cost?" That single line hit like a sledgehammer. The room went silent. Reporters scribbled furiously. It wasn't about the bag. It was about what she had to do to get it. What she felt she was being bought for. And in that moment, Jane's testimony stopped being about luxury or status. It became about survival. She described the gifts not as rewards, but as tools of manipulation. Diddy, she claimed, knew exactly how to keep women loyal, through a toxic mix of fear, money, and power. But it was what she said next that hinted there might be even more to this story. Jane may be the most detailed witness so far, but she's not alone. Court documents suggest that multiple other women have come forward, either through sealed testimonies or civil suits. Some stories mirror Jane's almost exactly. Same locations, same events, same pressure tactics. The phrase freak-offs appears more than once, and each new account strengthens the prosecution's argument. This wasn't isolated. It was a pattern. One woman, according to reports, claimed she was flown out to join Diddy's private events under the impression it was business, only to find herself coerced into scenarios she never agreed to. Another described being filmed without her consent. And although Cassie Ventura's lawsuit was settled privately last year, the impact it had on opening the floodgates of testimony can't be denied. What began with one woman's claim has now become a potential domino effect, with Diddy facing not just legal consequences, but the total collapse of his public image. The prosecution believes the case is growing. The defense says it's all lies. But in federal court, under oath, the stakes are life-altering, and the jury hasn't even heard the worst yet. As the trial heads into its 6th week, one thing is clear. This is no longer just about Diddy. It's about a system of silence, money, and influence that protected him for decades, if the witnesses are to be believed. Diddy has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His lawyers say the accusations are exaggerated, opportunistic, and completely false. But with each new testimony, that defense gets harder to maintain, especially in the court of public opinion. Inside that federal courtroom, there's no music, no cameras, no entourage, just cold facts and personal trauma spilling out onto the record. If Diddy is convicted, the consequences will be historic. Not just for him, but for the industry that surrounded him, the parties, the power, the culture of silence. All of it will be on trial. But if he's acquitted, that raises an entirely different question. How many people will stay silent next? Time. For now, the world watches through courtroom sketches and second-hand quotes, piecing together the image of a man once seen as untouchable, now caught in the eye of a legal storm that could define the rest of his life. The final verdict hasn't been read. The gavel hasn't fallen. But no matter how this ends, everything has already changed.